A group of explorers arrive at a strange, hostile, and desolate land on an adventure to find a mysterious city. Inside this city's walls, they find alien horrors with a hideous indifference to humanity. And also tentacles. Now, did I just describe H.P. Lovecraft's And the Mountains of Madness or Terry Nation's The Daleks, the first Doctor Who story? The answer is yes, by the way. Yes, Howard Phillips Lovecraft, pioneer of cosmic horror, the incel movement, and horrible names for cats, has had quite the influence on Britain's only remaining cultural export. From classic through modern and across the expanded universe, Doctor Who's endless horde of writers are downright obsessed with cribbing concepts from this sandbox of elder gods, creepy cults, and impronounceable names. But what are the tricks of the trade that make Lovecraft stories so influential? How do you translate the existential dread of insignificance in the face of godlike unstoppable horrors to a show about a magic man with a wand who kicks said horrors in the beanbag? Part 1. What is cosmic horror? Cosmic horror is a subgenre of horror, sort of a mix of grind horror, doom horror, and whatever the hell OPEF are supposed to be. It focuses on the fear of the unknowable or incomprehensible and humanity's insignificance in the face of it. But I think it's best summed up by this quote from Supernatural Horror in Literature, an essay by Lovecraft himself. The true weird tale has something more than secret murder, bloody bones, or a sheeted form clanking chains according to rule. A certain atmosphere of breathless and unexplainable dread of outer, unknown forces must be present. And there must be a hint, expressed with a seriousness and portentousness becoming its subject, of that most terrible conception of the human brain, a malign and particular suspension or defeat of those fixed laws of nature which are our only safeguard against the assaults of chaos and the demons of unplumbed space. In the simplest terms, cosmic horror preys on our insignificance in the face of the wider universe, humanity facing forces that can crush mind and body with incomprehensible levels of evil, or, worse still, indifference. And also tentacles. Forbidden knowledge is all over the place in cosmic horror. You can't turn a corner without tripping over a thing man isn't meant to know. The Necronomicon is probably the most famous example, an ancient grimoire that pops up all over the place in his stories, a magical text that allegedly holds the power to summon Katie Hopkins. Many of Lovecraft's monsters are so strange, so alien in their physical dimensions that even clapping eyes on them can drive a person insane. While Cthulhu is probably the most famous of these monstrosities, he's also a total scrub compared to Nyarlathotep, Yog-Sothoth, and this Bo. This type of antagonist casts a wide shadow over the narrative, with their very presence making everything our characters hold dear pale into insignificance. Because in Lovecraft's world, the main characters are never the centre of the story. Most of the time going insane, dying, or going insane and dying, and the terrible things bred in the darkest corners of the universe can, at best, be mildly inconvenienced. Doctor Who isn't really like that. While it has occasioned forays into outright pessimism, it's fundamentally an optimistic world where heroic people do incredible things, and yet it keeps on dipping into this moist, quivering well of ideas. Part 2. Cosmic Horror in Classic Who. In this section of the video, we'll take a look at some of the episodes influenced by cosmic horror in classic Doctor Who. We'll take a look at how it's cast a spooky shadow over some of the most well-regarded stories in the show's history, and also the Web Planet. Ah yes, the one Doctor Who story I've never heard anyone defend. This adaptation of A Bug's Life by a film student without a single functional sensory organ fails at every single aspect of visual storytelling. But it does feature the Animus, a glowing blob of tentacles that arrived from an unknown world and began psychically taking over the inhabitants of planet Vortis. While the Web Planet feels more like the dullest sleep paralysis nightmare of all time than a true cosmic horror story, the Animus itself feels very much like a prototype for some of the far more straightforwardly Lovecraftian beasties we encounter later. Speaking of which, the Abominable Snowmen and the Web of Fear. This duology of stories introduces us to the Great Intelligence, described as a sort of formless, shapeless thing floating around in space like a cloud of mist, only with a mind and will, which very much feels like a refinement of the Animus into something a lot more abstract and arcane. We've also got our forbidden knowledge bases covered, with Professor Travers bringing back relics he should have left well enough alone and allowing the Intelligence to come back for round 2. While we still haven't quite reached anything close to a truly eldritch horror at this point in the show's development, this marks a definitive step in that direction. Side note, the expanded universe would also end up going wild with adding cosmic horror elements to the Great Intelligence backstory, but we'll get to that in a bit. The Pyramids of Mars! According to Philip Hinchcliffe, writer Robert Holmes had a theory that there's no such thing as good and evil in the universe. It's all just part of a process, and the side you fall into simply depends on how you're made. He was fascinated by the notion of an organic life form which lands on Earth and causes havoc because it's neither intentionally bad or good. It's just that its process conflicts with ours and appears evil by comparison. Sutekh embodies that moral calculus, indifferent to the suffering he causes because in his mind that's just how things should be. Why should he care if people die? They're nothing but insects to him. While in previous stories the Doctor stood as the lone barrier between squishy, insignificant humans and the godlike aliens, now he's just as squishy and insignificant as the rest of us. At least until the ending where the Doctor traps him in the time vortex like the sad sister-shagging loser he is. Image of the Fendal. And here we come to the most clear-cut example of cosmic horror in classic Doctor Who. In this story, the Fendal is every bit the classic eldritch abomination. Humans are left incapable of gazing upon even a ghost of its true self without dying of sheer terror or being warped into one of its monstrous servants. It's been manipulating human history since the beginning of our tiny insignificant species, and it's got a full-on creepy cult attempting to summon it into our plane of existence. It also sees the Doctor forced to do some very undoctory things to stop it. Even without the implication that humanity is nothing but fodder and a machine for pigs, this story gets about as close as you can to true cosmic horror while still being Doctor Who. The Curse of Femric. With the Cartmel master plan rebuilding the Doctor Who into an enigmatic cosmic mastermind with all the power creep that suggests, it was only inevitable they would end up facing an ancient horror from the dawn of time of their very own. This story's mystery, involving secret codes and ancient Viking lore, makes it feel right at home alongside Lovecraft's work, and Femric himself reads like Sutekh and the Femdal got together one lonely night and did the fusion dance, if you know what I mean. Combining Sutekh's flair for the dramatic, immense destructive power and penchant for possessing people with the Fendal's manipulation of human bloodlines and conversion of victims into zombified slaves. And even the fact that Ace is technically related to our love interest of the week doesn't detract from the fact that Femric is a suitably epic final adversary for the 7th Doctor. Wait, what are you talking about? This isn't the final episode of Classic Part 3. Cosmic horror in post-revival Who. In Doctor Who The Next Generation, the Lovecraftian influence got ramped up from something that pops up every now and again to add a neat new layer to a key component of the show's success. We need look no further than the Time War for evidence of this. Imagine the Time War from the perspective of a 21st century human who doesn't know the Doctor. It's this unfathomably large, multi-dimensional conflict between two alien civilizations so advanced they'd make Arthur C. Clarke brown his trousers. And this one idea informs all the world-building, character development and tone of the first 4 seasons. You know, the only ones your mum considers canon. Speaking of unfathomable horrors from the dawn of creation, in the Impossible Planet / the Satan Pit, we're introduced to the Beast, an ancient entity that embodies pure evil as a fundamental cosmic force. Inspiring depictions of the devil throughout this universe's mythology, this story borrows a lot from Pyramids of Mars, from casting Sutekh's voice actor Gabriel Wolfe as the Beast to the Doctor being rendered insignificant in the face of the Monster of the Week's raw, potent sexual magnetism. However, Midnight is easily the closest to true cosmic horror we've gotten in Doctor Who's revival, with the Doctor trapped on a space bus with a group of perfectly ordinary human bastards and one unknowable, unstoppable force with motives we can't possibly begin to wrap our brain bits around. The Doctor, our walking, talking comfort blanket on this magical mystery tour of ways the universe can kill, maim or traumatize you forever, is left absolutely defeated by this thing, and it's only through a snap decision by someone the rest of the characters don't even bother to learn the name of that they survive. In cosmic horror, there are no heroes, only the void. And tentacles. Speaking of tentacle-filled voids, the season finale of David Tentacle's 3rd season as the Doctor shows that his continued existence is the only thing keeping the universe from disappearing completely. Can you imagine? Anyway, it turns out the Daleks are behind basically everything ever, and this happens to be no exception. As they invade Earth with the Doctor nowhere to be seen, we're treated to characters we know and love, and also Captain Jack break down in despair as the human race is confronted with an eldritch horror embodying the very ideology ideology Lovecraft himself once supported. So our heroes have all mentally broken down and resigned themselves to their fates. There's horrible squiddly things raining death from the sky, and stars are literally in alignment. And then Donna Noble presses some buttons and the Daleks went boom, which I think we can all agree is what Lovecraft would have wanted. I would include Listen with its completely inexplicable, mind-bending, possibly not even their antagonist that's potent enough to nearly drive the Doctor, Thelma and Louising over the edge, but Big Finish had other ideas about that one, so in Extremis, we're treated to the concept of a book that reveals a truth potent enough to drive the human race, Thelma and Louising, over the edge, in a manner very reminiscent of The King in Yellow, a play within a play from a series of short stories by Robert W. Chambers which served as a key influence on Lovecraft's own writing style. This kicks off what seems to be a series filled with all kinds of shenanigans of the horrific and or cosmic variety, but Toby Whithouse had other ideas, so in the world of Who post-2005, humanity has a future to look forward to, barely scraping by until the heat death of the universe, whereupon they'll be scooped up, mutilated and used as foot soldiers in the slaughter and subjugation of their ancestors as part of a plot by a cackling psychopathic demigod to prove he's smarter than his crush from school. So that's classic and new Who, but what about the expanded media? Yeah, this is where things get... yeah, I think it says a lot that the Doctor vs. Cthulhu novel White Darkness, in which the 7th Doctor is pitted in a race against time to keep old Lulu's alarm from going off, is the least crazy thing I'm about to cover. In this book, the Great Old Ones are prehistoric interdimensional conquerors, which is damn right quaint compared to what's next. In The All-Consuming Fire, a story which boring people who hate fun insist didn't happen, the 7th Doctor teams up with Sherlock Holmes to stop Azathoth, who would take a much bigger boat than the one that defeated Cthulhu. At least 4 times as long. So there's this bit where the Doctor does his doctory thing and explains just what the Great Old Ones are. However, he ends up giving us this little gem. The Great Old Ones are those gods. There's Cthulhu, who we met in Haiti if you recall, and the gods of Ragnarok, who Ace will tell you about if you ask her nicely, and Nyarlathotep, who I sincerely hope never to encounter, and Dagon, who was worshipped by the Sea Devils, and the entity known as Hastur calling himself Femric, and who Ace will not tell you about no matter how nicely you ask, and Yog-Sothoth, who I met in Tibet and again in London, and Loyagor, who settled quite happily on Vortis. So, for those keeping score at home, that's Cthulhu, the gods of Ragnarok for some reason, Dagon, Hastur, Yog-Sothoth, Loyagor, and Nyarlathotep's names in the Doctor's mouth. But what's really interesting is how several classic Who monsters have been retconned into being Great Old Ones all along, with Femric, the Great Intelligence, and the Animus being revealed as Hastur, Yog-Sothoth, and Loyagor respectively. As for Nyarlathotep, the crawling chaos, the god of 1,000 forms, the stalker among the stars, well, in The Death of Art, we get this little tidbit during a confrontation between companion to the 7th Doctor, Ros Forrester, and an agent of the Great Old Ones. The Doctor is the emissary of your master's worm. He is the messenger of the powers you draw upon. He is more than man. He is the troubler at the gate, the walker with 1,000 forms, the part of the idiot god which embraces the pain of reason. He is the thing from the void which mocks the blind apes of truth. He is the dark messenger, Naya. So yeah, it turns out Doctor Who is actually the tale of the outer god Nyarlathotep kidnapping and brainwashing humans so they can joyride around the universe, ruining the other Great Old Ones' fun. And just think about the implications of that for a second. This means that the Web Planet is actually a cosmic struggle on a scale no human mind can comprehend, and not a terrible episode that never should have been made. Oh wait, no, sorry, you're right, I'm being unfair there. 6 terrible episodes that never should have been made. Now, if you like this video, then maybe you'll like this one, which has over an hour of obscure Doctor Who lore. Bye!